Hello everybody. In today's video, I want to show you guys how to take this photo from day to night. It's a really easy thing to do, and especially on this photo where I came out, the sunrise was not very good. I wish that I would have got better conditions, but I didn't, so instead I decided to turn it into a night photo. This isn't something that I do very frequently, but it is something I get asked about quite a bit, is how can I turn my daytime photos into nighttime photos? How can I blend them together? So I'm going to show you guys a quick and easy way to do it in this video. I highly recommend pausing and playing and doing this alongside a photo of your own and trying it out. Now, these photos were shot on completely different times, completely different days. There's absolutely no integrity to this photo at all when I blend it this way. Just for that reason, I'm not going to use this photo for anything other than this tutorial. I just wanted to show you guys how to briefly do that. Of course, if you are doing a blend like this, I highly recommend that you maintain some kind of integrity. Make sure if you're using the Milky Way that you're facing south. If you're using like the North Star or any stars in the sky, make sure you're facing north, whatever it may be. Try and maintain at least the same direction is my recommendation. But of course, post-processing is up to you to decide how much you want to do. So go ahead and do whatever you want. Here we go, guys. Let's jump right in there. First, we're going to be starting in Lightroom and moving into Photoshop. Okay, so we've got our two photos here, and I don't want to do any editing to them beforehand other than I want to make sure that we've got profile corrections on. You can see that really helps get rid of some of the vignetting around the edge on that photo, and profile corrections on this one. The other important thing to note is that these two photos are very similar in focal length. You can see 18 millimeters and you can see 17 millimeters, so pretty close in focal length. Let's go ahead and open these two photos in Photoshop. I'm going to shift click to select them both. I'm going to go up to Photo, and I'm going to go down to Edit In, and we're going to open as layers in Photoshop. Then we will let this load out, and we'll pick up this video once Photoshop opens with these two files. Now that these two files are open here in Photoshop, I'm going to show you guys how I go about combining them. First off, I'm going to hide this layer here with our Milky Way on it. I'm going to drop this to the bottom because I'm going to blend these two together. Now, what we want to do here with this top image is get rid of the sky, because that's where, of course, our Milky Way is going to be. The other thing that I want to do is actually do a little bit of warping, because I want this image to have a little bit more sky for the Milky Way, make a little bit more room for the Milky Way. So what I'm going to do first is hit Command T to transform, and I'm just going to drag this down, and I'm creating a lot more ability for me to put some sky in the top. I'm going to hit Enter when I'm happy with that, and then we will go in and make our selection. So there's a couple different ways to select the sky. The easiest way on this image is going to be to grab this quick selection tool, and we can just go in here and paint over the layer. And you can see it really easily snaps to the edge. I also just want to grab this top part. And we are going to go ahead and hit the layer mask button here. You can see now we have masked the wrong thing. We masked in the sky and out the foreground. All we have to do is hit Command I to invert that. And now you can see we have easily gotten rid of the sky. Super easy. Now we can unhide this Milky Way layer, and we're going to move this around to make it look a little bit more realistic. I'm going to hit Command T here. I'm going to make it a little bit larger. The reason why it's appearing slightly smaller is because I took it on a little bit smaller of a camera. And I am holding the shift bar as I'm dragging this out to make sure that we don't mess up the proportions on the image at all. So I held the shift bar. And then we can drag this up. Now I kind of want to rotate this a little bit just so we have a little bit more Milky Way going across the sky. And let's say right about in there. And let's go ahead and control click. We'll grab the warp. Just pull this out just so that we don't have any blank spots in the frame. And I think that's looking good. So we will hit Enter. Now, as you look at this, you're probably thinking that does not look realistic at all whatsoever. The foreground is way too bright. So I'm going to show you guys how we go about making this look way more realistic. So what we want to do here essentially is we want to create new adjustment layers. The first thing we're going to do is use an exposure adjustment layer. And if I adjust the exposure, it makes the whole image darker or lighter. But if I click this button here, it underlines this layer, and that means that the exposure adjustment only affects this layer. So now I can adjust the exposure and make this look a little bit more realistic. We're going to bring that down right about there. And I also want to grab a Hue Saturation layer. Again, we'll hit the down arrow so that it applies to this layer. I'm going to drop the saturation because in night photos, this image is usually very desaturated. You can try adjusting the hue and see if that does anything for you. I don't really like what it's doing in this photo. So instead, we're going to grab a color balance layer, hit that down arrow, and let's just kick a little bit of blue in there, a little bit of cyan maybe even less than that, and a little less blue. You can see it's just really subtle. And you can even adjust the opacity if you don't like how much the effect is applying. And you can also go ahead and change the tone if you want to change it to just the shadows rather than the midtones, which that helps a lot of times to make things look more realistic, make those shadows a little more blue. And that is looking pretty good. You can already see now it's starting to look a little bit more realistic. But there's still a little bit of work to do. The other thing I like to do sometimes is grab a curves layer. Again, we're going to hit this down arrow. All of these layers are only applying to this top layer. They're not applying at all to our Milky Way layer. And I like to just drag this bottom of the curves layer over to the right just slightly. You can see I've only done it 5 points here. But what that does is it gives it more of a deep black look, which is exactly what we're going for. And you can try even adjusting the top as well if you want to add some contrast. You can slide things around here. Bring that down, bring that over. All right, and that, I think, is looking pretty good for me. So all of these adjustments create this more realistic looking blend. I always use these 4 layers: exposure, hue, saturation, color balance, and curves when I'm doing a blend like this. The other thing that you are going to want to do in a lot of your photos is create one more exposure layer, hit the down arrow, and you want to adjust these things that are far out, very far away, because in a daytime photo, a lot of times there's a lot of atmosphere to look through, and these things that are far away will appear brighter, but in a nighttime photo, they're going to appear too bright. So you can bring that exposure down, and then you can invert this layer mask, Command I, and you can go in with a brush tool with a white brush. I like to paint in maybe 20% opacity. Make sure you're at 0% hardness, and I just like to paint in on these mountains in the background just to kind of make it look a little bit more realistic. And you could even paint these mountains if you wanted as well. And we'll zoom in here. And you can see that it's actually giving us a little bit of banding here, but that is essentially, you can see when we zoom in, it gets rid of that. So it's just a product of the rendering on Photoshop. If you do want it to be a little bit more feathered though, you can bring up the feather amount until you feel it's a little bit more feathered. I might go with something like that. Again, like I said, these streaks here are just due to Photoshop's rendering of this photo. But it's not actually like that in the final image, as you could see when I zoomed in. Now, the other thing you can do if you want to make some adjustments to the sky, you want to obviously match the sky to the foreground. You can go in here and create these same adjustments on this layer. With the down arrow, you can see now this curves is only affecting the Milky Way layer. So I might add some contrast here. And there's a variety of things you could do. You also may want to use a color balance layer and tone this to match your image a little bit better. We'll add 5 points there maybe. And I think that's looking pretty good. We can even add a hue saturation. So really basic here way to adjust your image. I'm actually going to bring the blues down a little bit. Bring the yellows. Let's actually use a color sample here and sample orange here. Bring that up. So you can see really easy. It's already starting to look pretty realistic. The next thing that I might do to this image is just go ahead and create a stamped copy of everything here. You can see we've got a lot of different layers working for us, but if we want a base layer to work on, we can hit Command, Alt, Option, Shift, and E. And that is going to create a merged copy of all of the layers below that are active, that are not being hidden. Sometimes it takes a second to load out. Okay, so now that we have this one stamped layer, you can name this background or whatever you want. But essentially, this is just all of the layers below stamped into one layer. Now you can do your basic edits. So if you wanted to just save this right back into Lightroom and edit it there, you could. In Photoshop, you could use the camera raw filter and just apply some basic adjustments onto this photo. There's really a variety of things you can do, obviously, and I'm not going to show you my whole Milky Way workflow. Unfortunately, I save that for my premium tutorials and for my workshops, but I'll show you guys just a few of the basic adjustments that I might do on this photo. And I might even bring up the shadows, even though I brought them down before. Bring up the whites, bring up the blacks, add a little bit of texture, add a little bit of clarity. There's a ton of different things you can do here, but I actually want to bring this down a little bit. But that is looking pretty good to me. I can go ahead and hit OK. So I don't have my timer on, but I'm guessing that that probably took me 8 or 9 minutes. Super easy and super simple to turn my daytime photo into nighttime photos. It's really important though that you are using a photo that doesn't have sunlight hitting anywhere in the frame. If you've got sunlight hitting your foreground or the background, it's not gonna work because it's gonna look really unrealistic when there's a light source hitting something and it's supposed to be mimicking after dark. Reason why this photo works perfectly is because it was all totally shady. So it's really easy for me to make it darker, but overall, just a really easy concept to apply, something that you probably didn't think would be as easy as it really is to do in Photoshop, but give this one a try on one of your photos, guys. Let me know if you have any questions or if there's any other advanced techniques you would like me to show that have to do with this. So I want to thank you guys so much for checking out this week's video. As always, I really appreciate your likes and subscribes. Thank you guys so much. We will see you guys next weekend. Bye-bye.